This weekend marking a somber anniversary in our nation's history. 20 years since the 9/11 attacks. Nearly 3,000 people died in those terrorist attacks when those commercial airplanes crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon. Those aboard United Airlines Flight 93 died when their hijacked flight crashed into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Those passengers fighting back in their last moments. The attacks forever changing the face of our nation and its security measures. Today, FBI Director Christopher Wray honoring the lives of those lost.
Every day we wake up asking ourselves, what do we need to do to keep people safe today and tomorrow and the day after? Because of September 11th, the FBI transformed itself in ways that have made us better able to carry out our mission to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution.
Today, there is stepped up security in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania on the eve of this anniversary. And we talked about some of those changes in security measures. So joining me to talk more about this milestone that we're meeting and all the changes we've seen since, we have NBC's Meet the Press moderator, Chuck Todd. Chuck, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, thanks for asking me.
So, of course, 20 years since 9/11, so many things have changed. So many policies have changed, the way that America defends itself, how the government's tracking threats now. What are some of the big takeaways that we could see over the years that things have changed?
Well, I mean, there's probably no greater change than just how we fly in an airplane, right? I mean, if you think about that, yes, we went through screenings, but my goodness, right? I mean, you know, I remember back in the day, you met somebody at the gate, right? Just think about a little thing like that. You know, you don't necessarily meet someone at the gate anymore and hold the signs. You now have to wait out. And I know that seems like a small thing, but, you know, my goodness, if you're of a certain age, you know, there was a time that it was so much different. And that's just one of a million things. But, you know, what is remarkable, I think, is that we keep looking at this is how on that crisis, we responded as a nation, meaning people were Americans before they were partisans. Here we are with COVID, in some ways more threatening to our way of life than anything the terrorists had done. And we're more divided than ever. And, you know, so it's certainly begging the question, why can't the spirit of that first year after 9/11, which of course didn't last long, but think about what happened. At 9/11, we were only 9 months removed from the Florida election, which was decided in the Supreme Court. So it's not as if we were all just getting along. We just impeached a president 2 years before that. So we were a very divided nation, but that brought us together. We're a very divided nation. COVID didn't. The only conclusion I've come to is that in America, if the enemy is foreign, the Nazis, the Soviets, Al-Qaeda, we'll get in a foxhole together. But if the enemy is societal, racism, or an invisible enemy like COVID, we apparently turn on each other. So hopefully we can figure out how to learn something from this.
Now, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I think Americans do have the beautiful capability of coming together. You know, something that I think about is, you kind of alluded to this, there's like a whole generation of folks who don't know what it was like before these attacks, those who are younger. But everyone else who is of the age of, you were there, you witnessed either on TV or you were there firsthand and you survived. You have memories of what it was like that day. I'm just curious to see what sort of things stick out to you about that day.
Look, you know, it's funny. I was working at a print publication at the time. I wasn't in television, but I was certainly in journalism. I was working in Washington, D.C. We had offices that were right on the Potomac River. And I'll never forget my entire staff over watching a window. We were on a deadline and just looking for the smoke from the Pentagon. And I guess what I've been thinking about a lot lately, when I've been thinking about the last 20 years, is when those of us that were here in D.C., we were sure more attacks were coming. I mean, my offices were across the street from the Saudi embassy. We were petrified of that. We knew that could be a target. We were 3 blocks from the State Department. There were all sorts of rumors that there were going to be terrorist threats. We were so convinced that we were going to have to live the way people live in Tel Aviv, Beirut, Remember growing up in the 80s and 90s, living in Berlin, you'd see discos get bombed and things like this. This didn't happen in Washington, D.C., not in America's capital. And yet we were, to think it didn't happen, and yet that's a searing memory for me. I was so sure it was going to happen. And what, we all were for that first couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a lot of uncertainty, even just on that day of what was happening and what the extent of everything that was unfolding would be. Chuck, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks for asking.
Take care. And we'll remind folks at home, of course, be sure to tune in to Meet the Press this Sunday, 10 a.m. right here on WCNC Charlotte, and then stick around after that. After Meet the Press, a special edition of Flashpoint. We are dedicating our show to the victims of 9/11. Ben Thompson talking with a retired U.S. Marine Corps captain about the legacy of that day and the lessons learned. Once again, that's Sunday, Flashpoint. That's going to be at 11 a.m. right here on WCNC Charlotte.